Okay, so in the last video I covered the military tab of the research tree, and we discussed some of the synergies present that you could use depending upon your playstyle, whether you're more warlike or more peace-loving. Today I'm going to be delving a bit into the farming tree. It is a shorter tree, so this video shouldn't take nearly as long. To start out, we have orchard management, which gives you access to apple orchards and increases the productivity of your apple orchards as you continue to research it. There are many in-game jokes about the apple gods or farming apples because it is considered the most basic food type, and many people will max it all the way out. This is a good strategy depending upon the playstyle you're going for. If you're focusing more on military, it may behoove you to just max out apple orchard management for the increased apple production rather than sort of diversifying and trying to do a couple points in everything. You'll ultimately have greater yields focusing on one food type and being able to set your rations to ×4 rather than diversifying and having many food types and getting popularity from that, because you'll get more popularity from setting your food rations to ×4 than you would for having 5 food types in your granary. So if you're going for this strategy I discussed here, I would go for the orchard management over dairy farming or any of the other food types, because apple orchards are dirt cheap. They're the cheapest food building in the game. So even early on, you can mass produce apples if you research this tree all the way out. Going on to the next one, we have dairy farming, which unlocks the dairy farm and increases productivity of cheese in your villages as you research it on up. It doesn't have the same value that apples do because the buildings cost a little bit more. So when you hit a higher number of buildings in your villages, the costs will start to add up, especially if you didn't invest in tools, which I discussed in the industry tab 2 videos ago. The third one on this list is fishing, which unlocks the fishing jetties and increases their productivity. If you don't have a river village, there are 2 river villages, River 1 and River 2. Salt Lake is not a river village. If you do not have either of the aforementioned river villages, do not bother investing in fishing. Fishing is not available before, I believe, level 12, so it will probably not be a problem, but if you're tempted to invest a point or 2 in it, hold off until you have a river village. And even then, researching it all the way up to level 8 is not really advisable before the prince level. 22, I believe it is. The fourth on this list is Plow. Now, Plow is pretty important, which is probably why it's researched from the beginning of the game. It allows you to research wheat production, which will give you access to bakeries and by way of bakeries, bread, and hops farming, which gives you access to ale. Now, increasing the research in just Plow will increase the productivity of hops, wheat, vegetables, and apples. So basically all your food types. If you research more particular sub-trees in the plowing tree, we have, let's start at the bottom, with hops farming. Now, hops farming is critical if you're going to be feeding your peasants ale. Ale can boost your popularity substantially, so you might want to consider going into hops farming instead of diversifying and going for more food types, because in terms of popularity, the yields you'll see from having hops being fed to or ale by way of hops fed to your peasants on ×4 rations is higher than feeding 5 types of food to your peasants. So early on in the game, hops farming can be a very good investment in research points, especially if you max it all the way out to 8. Similar to the way apples were. As a matter of fact, if you went ahead with the apple strategy and maxed that tree all the way out to 8, my next food tree that I would go for would be hops, because it is like I mentioned before, the bonus you'll see is higher than having or just adding another food type. But let's go on to the other food types. We have wheat production. Now this gives you access to the all-in-one bakery. They just call it a bakery, but when you place it down, you'll notice it's a farm and it is a mill. Especially if you played older Stronghold titles, this may confuse you because you used to have to build the wheat farm, the mill, and the bakery. Now it's all in one, and it's called a bakery. Who knew? So anyway, we have wheat production giving you access to this building called a bakery. I already explained that. And researching it increases the productivity of it. Again, this is not something I would research unless you're going for the more economic approach. If you plan on not really playing a whole lot and just sitting back and farming, it's a peaceful life, and I'm not criticizing you, then it might be for you. If you are more interested in the military side of this game, I would hold off on wheat production until later in the game. Moving one more up, we have vegetable cropping, which is similar to wheat farming, except vegetables were not actually a food source in other Stronghold games, so that might surprise you. It is not a luxury resource like in Stronghold 2 or Stronghold 3, but rather a base food resource. And it functions similarly to wheat. Now we get up more specific with brewing. Brewing increases the productivity of your hops and breweries, which means you'll be brewing more beer to feed your peasants. Obviously, I don't know why I'm stating the obvious here, but I am. So if you're planning on going for very strong brewing options, maybe. Before level 16, no, definitely not. After level 16, yes. Like I said before, you're going for that synergy ×4 rations on apples and ale. I could definitely see investing in brewing. Now bakery just increases the bread production, that's all. If you don't have anything done in wheat production, don't bother with bread production. I don't know why you would, but I thought I would just say that. It is definitely a later game research because it'll enable you to, or it will make it so you don't need to have as many bakeries in your village because bread production is very high with that research completed. And finally, we have animal husbandry tree. This in general increases meat and cheese productivity. If you noticed before, I think I mentioned Plow increases all the food types, all the food except for dairy, and way down here with meat. So researching the animal husbandry increases meat and cheese, not the other food types though. Now the only one of interest here is pig breeding. Now what's interesting about this one is if you're going for, say, a highland village. Now the space is a bit limited, and maybe you want to go very like production house all the way out there, manufacturing, industrial complex style. Pig breeding can make it where you don't need to dedicate as much room in your village to food. You will just focus solely on meat and build those little pig pens. The pig, what is it called? It's a pig farm, okay. The pig farm is the smallest of all the farms in Stronghold Kingdoms, which means that if you're strapped for space, it's the go-to for food. Now, there will be a bit of research involved, but if it's a choice between orchard management and pig farms, keep in mind that the pig farms cost substantially more than the apple orchards do, and may not be a feasible strategy in the early game. If anything, I would hold off on the strategy until rank 16 or Knight, as you'll notice many of my videos focus on. Pig breeding will first unlock the pig farm and then increase the productivity of the pig farm as you research it, and butchery functions similarly to these two researches up here, brewing and bakery, which I covered before, simply increasing the productivity of the pig farms. So I hope you found this insightful. stay tuned for the final tab of the research tree, the education tab, which is quite in depth as military was. So you might want to definitely check that one out when it comes out. Thank you very much for listening or watching, and until next time, farewell.
Stronghold Kingdoms. The battle has just begun.